a former Miss Switzerland finalist, built a quiet life with her family. Until one February day, police walked into her home and witnessed one of the most gruesome murders they have ever seen. Hi, I'm Katie Ring, and welcome to Night Watch. Make sure to hit subscribe. Near the city of Basel, Switzerland, there's a residential area called Bingingen. I'm sorry if I butchered these names, but I'm going to try my best. It's the kind of place that reads quiet and normal from the outside. It's not flashy, not chaotic, just calm. And that sense of calm matters here because this case is about what happens when that kind of normal is broken. And at the center of it all is 38-year-old Kristina Joksimovic, a wife and mother of two young daughters whose life ended violently. But before we talk about what happened to her, it's important to understand who Kristina was. Kristina was known as a woman of ambition, grace, and confidence. She grew up loving life, playing foot volley, which is basically beach volleyball, but you can only use your feet. She described herself as someone who was down to earth and found enjoyment in simple things. But back in 2007, you could find Kristina in the spotlight, competing in a world far removed from her everyday life. Kristina was crowned Miss Northwest Switzerland and became a finalist in the Miss Switzerland pageant. For any young woman, this moment is a peak, a chance to represent your community, showcase your poise, and step onto the global stage. She was the kind of person who used her own success to build up others. She founded Catwalk Coach in 2007, a consulting and coaching agency focused on runway training, confidence building, and modeling skills. Her Instagram was filled with videos of her clients and her catwalk training sessions, and she even mentored model Dominique Rinderknecht ahead of her appearance at the Miss Universe pageant in 2013. Her dedication to the industry meant she was often traveling for work and having to balance her professional life with her personal commitments. She wasn't just teaching poses, she was building self-esteem and helping young women navigate a demanding career. This was a woman who took the confidence she found on stage and channeled it into empowering other women, a beautiful dynamic cycle that defined her adult life. And by all accounts, her adult life was thriving. She always pushed forward professionally while remaining dedicated to her family. For anyone looking in, Kristina and her husband, who goes by Thomas in the Swiss media due to privacy laws, presented an image of a successful modern family in a picturesque town. Kristina and her husband lived in a comfortable home in the wealthy part of Bingingen and had been married for several years. They would also often post images of vacations and family moments together. But that image, as we are reminded time and time again in true crime, can be a carefully constructed facade. The reality, prosecutors allege, was far darker than the image projected. Hi, I'm Katie Ring, and welcome to Night Watch. If you're into true crime, real-time courtroom drama, and late-night deep dives, you're in the right place. Subscribe to my YouTube channel or follow me on Spotify. We have new episodes every weeknight. This episode discusses an active criminal case. The information we share is based on what's publicly available at the time of recording and may change as new evidence comes to light. We aim to inform, not to decide guilt or innocence. So everyone mentioned is presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. From the outside, nothing about their life screamed danger. There are no public reports of any kind of altercations or even loud arguments. It's much quieter than that, which is why it's so unsettling. And the uncomfortable answer is sometimes the public doesn't see what's happening behind a door until that door is forced open. And on February 13th, 2024, the quiet normalcy of Bingingen fractured into something investigators would later describe as extraordinarily disturbing. Police are called to a residence on a calm suburban street. The call comes from Kristina's father. Earlier that day, he had gone to her home because he couldn't reach his daughter. She wasn't answering calls, she wasn't answering messages, and this was not like her. When he walked inside, nothing looked obviously ransacked. There was no overturned furniture and no signs of a struggle at first glance. But when he made his way towards the laundry room and looked a little closer, something stopped him dead in his tracks. He saw a plastic bag with blonde hair sticking out of the top of the bag. He recognized the hair instantly as his daughter's. This prompted him to open the bag and discover his daughter's remains. He was sent into an immediate panic and called the police. When officers arrived, they treated the scene as a potential homicide within minutes. The house was quickly secured and forensics teams were called in. And just as a fair warning, the details of this case are pretty gruesome, so proceed with caution. According to official briefings, parts of Kristina's body had been dismembered, and investigators discovered evidence consistent with the use of tools including a knife, garden shears, and a jigsaw. Even more disturbing was that prosecutors later alleged that there were attempts to blend or puree remains and dissolve them in containers filled with chemical agents, details that shocked even veteran investigators. The initial autopsy would later conclude that Kristina had been strangled in a violent, deliberate act. All signs inside the home were pointing to a prolonged effort to conceal or destroy evidence. The precision, the materials, and the staged normalcy of the surrounding living space all suggested something chilling. Whoever had done this had taken steps to erase what had happened. But in a crime scene this elaborate, there were two very important pieces of the puzzle missing. There was no sign of Kristina's husband or their two young daughters. If you're a mom or just a busy woman like me, finding time to shop when you're juggling work, life, and family can be overwhelming. And searching through rack after rack to find the perfect pieces can be tedious to say the least, if you don't have the time or energy. If you're looking to update your wardrobe in the new year, Daily Look is the #1 highest rated premium personal styling service for women. And it's basically like having a personal shopper and a best friend rolled into one. Here's how it works. You get a real personal stylist, not an app or an algorithm, who curates up to 12 premium pieces just for you, based on your body, your lifestyle, and your personal taste. They arrive at your door, you try everything on at home, keep what you love, and then send back the rest. Free shipping both ways. You can schedule boxes every 30, 60, or 90 days, so it fits your life perfectly. What I loved most is that the quiz is super simple and all of the pieces are handpicked just for you. Currently waiting on my first box, but if you see me in anything other than my typical hoodie or crew neck, it will definitely be thanks to Daily Look. Take your style quiz at dailylook.com and use code CRIMEHOUSE to get 50% off your first styling fee. On February 13th, 2024, in the quiet Swiss neighborhood of Bingingen, authorities investigated a truly horrific scene. Former Miss Switzerland finalist Kristina Joksimovic had been murdered and dismembered. Kristina's husband, referred to as Thomas in court documents, was noticeably missing. But even more concerning was the fact that their two young daughters were nowhere to be found. The absence of the children triggered immediate urgency. Officers searched the house, the property, and the nearby areas. Fortunately, they were able to confirm that the girls were found elsewhere and unharmed. Where they were found has not been disclosed as of this recording, but they were immediately placed under the care of child protective authorities. As for Kristina's husband, Thomas, he was still nowhere to be found. And when investigators ran his phone, his car, and his known routes, they got no hits, no contact, and no explanation. In a matter of hours, he shifted from a missing family member to person of interest. And not long after that, according to prosecutors, he became the prime suspect in what was now a murder investigation. The investigative team processed every tool, chemical, and trace of evidence at the scene. With Kristina's remains identified and the children confirmed safe, investigators moved into what they later described as the critical hours phase of the case. Their priority was simple: to find Thomas. But then, finally, authorities were able to hone in on his location. He did not disappear across a border. He was taken into custody, alive, conscious, and capable of answering questions. Thomas was arrested for the murder of Kristina. What he allegedly told investigators forms one of the most hotly debated aspects of this case. Thomas originally claimed that he came home to find his wife dead and panicked, but less than a month later, he changed his story to self-defense. In this new version, he told investigators that she had attacked him with a knife and that he only reacted instinctively. But forensic evidence began to undercut that version almost immediately. The autopsy report of Kristina revealed clear strangulation marks, a detail that suggested a prolonged and intimate way to kill someone, meaning almost never accidental. And there was no evidence suggesting that Kristina had wielded a knife in any way that matched his account. Meanwhile, when investigators looked into Thomas himself, they found no injuries that aligned with his claim that Kristina attacked him with a knife. No cuts, no defensive wounds, no bruising pattern typical in close-range knife altercations. In fact, the forensic record painted a very different picture, one where Kristina was overpowered, killed, and then subjected to post-mortem actions that required planning and intention. Which brings us to the aftermath of the crime scene. What prosecutors claim he did after the killing, the dismemberment, the tools used, and the chemical attempts at dissolution. These steps don't traditionally align with self-defense scenarios. They align with concealment. But Thomas was holding firm on his self-defense claim. According to court documents, he says that he panicked and dismembered her body in the aftermath. However, he has not provided an explanation for cutting out her womb or blending her remains and dousing them in chemicals. Steps that prosecutors argue were not only deliberate efforts to conceal the crimes that experts say are inconsistent with a simple panic reaction, but that are simply calculated and cold-blooded. Over the following months, Thomas repeatedly appealed for release from custody. Each time, the court evaluated the severity of the allegations, the forensic evidence contradicting his actions, the flight risk, and the risk of tampering with evidence and influencing witnesses. Each time, courts denied his release. For more than a year, the case remained in an intensive investigative phase as prosecutors worked through forensic evidence, psychological evaluations, and legal reviews. Reports from acquaintances suggested that the couple's relationship had been in crisis for months before the murder. There were mentions that the police had previously been called regarding reports of physical violence in the household, implying possible domestic conflict before the fatal incident. Then, on December 10, 2025, the Basel-Landschaft's public prosecutor's office formally charged Kristina's husband with murder and disturbing the peace, citing the brutality of the killing and the extreme post-mortem actions allegedly taken to hide the crime. And through it all, one fact held steady. Thomas maintained his self-defense claim. What's left now is the slow grind of Swiss justice. Hearings, expert reports, judicial review, and eventually a trial in which each side will present its version of what happened on the day Kristina died. Once Thomas was in custody and the evidence had been cataloged, the case shifted from the forensics lab to the legal arena, where every detail, every timeline, and every statement would be dissected. In Switzerland, criminal proceedings tend to move quietly compared to American cases. There are no televised hearings, no daily courtroom sketches, no dramatic cross-examinations playing out on the evening news. So you're not going to be seeing this live streamed on any court TV anytime soon. But make no mistake, the legal battle in this case is just as intense. As of this recording, a trial date has not been set, and Thomas remains in custody awaiting his trial. Self-defense cases rely on coherence, cause and effect, and physical evidence that supports the account. In this case, prosecutors argue that the evidence tells a different story, a story far too common in cases of domestic violence. Inside a home that outwardly looked perfect to friends and neighbors, there was unprecedented violence behind the scenes. As we wait for the legal proceedings to continue in the murder trial involving former Miss Switzerland finalist Kristina Joksimovic, the prosecution is creating an ironclad case to show that her husband Thomas did not, in fact, act in self-defense. Investigators said Thomas showed a lack of empathy and cold-bloodedness after killing his wife and had sadistic sociopathic traits. Let's break down what we can expect to hear from both the prosecution and the defense. The prosecution's argument in this case hinges on three central pillars. The forensics contradict self-defense. Strangulation takes time, it takes pressure, and the injuries found on Kristina, compared to the near absence of injuries on Thomas, spoke loudly. The post-mortem actions show intent to hide the crime. Dismemberment and chemical dissolution aren't panic responses. They're deliberate. They require planning, tools, and time. And finally, the children were removed from the scene, a detail prosecutors consider relevant to premeditation, state of mind, or planning, though they have not publicly clarified how this fits into their story. Thomas's defense, however, has remained consistent. He claims Kristina attacked him with a knife. He reacted instinctively. Her death was not planned. And everything that happened afterward occurred while he was in a state of shock. At trial, prosecutors are expected to walk the court step by step through a detailed forensic timeline, laying out when Kristina was killed and what happened in the hours that followed. They will introduce physical evidence recovered from the home, including the tools investigators say were used, along with chemical analysis tied to the attempts to destroy or conceal her remains. The autopsy report will play a central role, particularly the findings that contradicted a spontaneous or defensive act. Prosecutors may also rely on any digital or behavioral data recovered from the home to establish intent, sequence, and the state of mind. Defense attorneys may attempt to introduce evidence of prior marital conflict to contextualize the incident, while emphasizing his psychological state in the moments during and after the killing. A key part of their strategy will likely involve challenging how investigators interpret the postmortem actions, arguing that panic, shock, and emotional collapse, rather than calculated intent, drove what happened after Kristina's death. But here's what sets this case apart. Switzerland rarely sees homicides of this nature. In fact, they have a statistically low homicide rate by international standards. So when Kristina Joksimowic's brutal death became public, Switzerland reacted with a mixture of disbelief and grief. Kristina had appeared on screens during the Miss Switzerland competition. She was a recognizable figure, not a celebrity in the tabloid sense, but someone who existed in Switzerland's cultural memory. When news broke, the public struggled with two competing images: the accomplished, poised woman who spent her career uplifting others, and the horrific violence that ended her life, which is why this case is so unsettling. Testimony from family members and others close to Kristina and the defendant may eventually shed more light on how such darkness could grow in a life that looked so ordinary from the outside. This is a case that continues to unfold, and as of this recording, a trial date has not been set. The details may shift as new evidence is presented and examined in court, so we'll keep you updated on any major developments. What we know is based on official statements, forensic reporting, and public records. But the full story of what happened inside that home is something only two people know, and one of them is gone. Kristina Joksimovic was more than the headlines that now surround her name. She was a mother, a mentor, a woman who built her confidence from the ground up and poured that strength into others. Her life mattered long before it became the subject of a criminal investigation. After her death became public, prominent figures in the Swiss modeling and pageant community, including former Miss Switzerland winners, expressed shock and grief, emphasizing Kristina's warmth, kindness, and devotion to her two young daughters. As for her husband, Swiss law is clear. He is presumed innocent unless and until he is proven guilty in a court of law. His claims of self-defense will be tested against the forensic evidence, the timeline, and the prosecution's theory. And until a verdict is reached, this case remains an active legal process. What did you think of tonight's case? Drop your thoughts and theories in the comments. See you next time. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel at Nightwatch Pod. Thank you, it truly helps me out.